Okay, folks. Up next, going to be Rod Miller. The pension problem in Pennsylvania is out of hand. It's a major cost driver in the school taxes that we pay as well as throughout the state. And it must be fixed, but it cannot be fixed with the Band-Aid approach legislation that they're trying to do. Rod Miller and committee have taken on this huge assignment. For months, they've collected data and analyzed it, and tonight, they're going to present it to you. However, folks, I gotta warn you. Here it comes, Rod. You're going to be guinea pigs tonight. This is Rod's first run before he takes it on the road to other legislators and other groups. So please be gentle. Let's welcome Berks County Patriots founding father and legislative chairman, Rodney Miller.
Okay, folks, are we on here? Okay. Yeah, he's right. This is the first time for me in a PowerPoint. In our projectionist, we've not had the amount of time we could have had to put this together, but we think we'll get through this. Just bear with us. If we make a couple of blunders, that's part of the amateur coming out of us. I thought all the time we're doing this, I was focused on the problems we have in Pennsylvania. Our costs, our corruption, our pensions. But the last couple of weeks, I'll tell you, I don't know how to keep my mouth shut. When I look at the circus going on in Washington today, who's tattoo and who's basically compromised security. Did Trump talk to the Russians, or did his committee talk to the Russians back and forth? You know, it's so trivial when you think about it. For years, Hillary and Obama, they sold 20% of our uranium to Russia. After they did that, the Russians gave $2 million to the Clinton Foundation, and then Bill went over and gave a speech. He got another $500,000. That doesn't seem to bother the press. What bothers the press is somebody in the Trump administration talked to the Russians. It didn't cost me a penny. I look at that, they sold, what, $2 billion? They gave $2 billion of money to Iran, ransom money, some of it bundled up and taken in flight to an airplane. Iran says they needed to do infrastructure. Well, they had money for infrastructure. Now they have it for what they need it for, is to buy missiles from North Korea. So our money's going to North Korea. North Korea got to feed their people. They need food. They buy grains from China. China gets their grain and whatever from the United States, subsidized by farmers. So our money, our subsidy to China, China to North Korea to Iran, back to the United States. I know now what they mean by the United States currency is reserve currency. It just makes a complete circle. Unbelievable. I can't believe it. That doesn't seem to bother the press. What bothers the press is somebody talked to the Russians in the Trump administration. I'm not here to talk about that, but it just gets on my crawl. As you might say, that's my talking points, as O'Reilly would say. Anyway, having said that, tonight I want to talk about three things. Categorically, I want to talk about the cost of government. I want to talk about the unconstitutional political pensions. And I want to talk about the corruption. And I assure you, they all tie together. One entity unto itself is not our major issue. From a cost standpoint, we have 253 senators and representatives that represent us in Harrisburg. Now, their agenda calls for 125 work days, or session days, although they call themselves full-time. And I suppose some of them spend time with their constituents and make it a full year's effort. When you weigh that against costs in other states, per capita-wise, we are the most expensive operating cost government in the nation. I wrote a piece, I don't know, at least probably about 12 years ago. I was legislative chairman of another organization. Back then when I wrote this, 2004 I believe it was, Pennsylvania cost per capita $23 for every citizen in Pennsylvania. And by comparison, New York was $10.82 per capita, Illinois $5.83, Ohio $3.69. Point being, we spend an awful lot of money to run our government. Jerry wrote a bill to reduce the size of the legislature. We had a gentleman, Ron Bolts, arguing against reducing the size. Whether we reduce the size or whatever, it's the cost. The cost is the problem. And certainly reducing the size could reduce the cost if they reduce the staffing. The individuals elected aren't really the bottom line cost of the legislature. But I tell you what, if they have a bill to vote on, which really puts some of those folks out of business, laid off, if you will, who in the world thinks a legislator is going to vote on a bill where the guy next to him might be getting the axe? It ain't going to happen. I don't see any way a bill reducing the legislature is ever going to get through. Pointing out, if you look at the cost of our government just to operate it, you're talking about the office spaces, satellite offices. Senators generally have 2, House members generally have 1. They get their per diem, they go back and forth to work. They have a staff at one time, the last time I checked, there was an average of 14 staff members per senator and 12 per House member. And that's not direct staff, that's payroll people and everything else. You reduce the amount of people up there, certainly the additional help is going to have to also be reduced. But it was calculated that to house 1 senator or 1 representative and his support people, it takes $226,000 a year. He personally only gets $86,000. With $226,000 per House and Senate member of 253, that's $57,178,000 just to support these folks. Now, Paul Kanger, political science professor at Grove City, he says we're only 2nd in the nation in cost to operate the government. Well, fact of the matter is, if you look at the slide there, projectionist got ahead of me, my fault. However, you look at the slide there, our congressmen, we have 18 congressmen, and of course 2 senators, federal government. Between them, it costs us $3,480,000 a year for the national elected officials. But if you look at Pennsylvania, the other slide, if you look at Pennsylvania, 203 reps, $86,000 each, 50 senators, $86,000 each. Totally those up, you got $21,758,000 in salaries for these elected officials. Now, in comparison, New York, they only have 213 House and Senate members, and they pay them $79,500. So New York functions on $16 million a year. California, they only have 100 to run the whole state, 38 million people. We have 13 million. They run their state with 100 representatives, and they pay them $100,000 a year, but that's only $10 million. Texas, they have 181. They only pay them $7,200 a year, and it costs them $1,303,000. And of course, there's New Hampshire, the poster boy, 424 House and Senate members, they pay them $200 a year. Now, you telling me that New York, California, and Texas are doing that awfully bad compared to Pennsylvania? We'll get into some of that, but there's an example how there's 3 states that are doing just fine, and it costs a lot less to run those states than it costs to run ours. Just again to make the point that aside from the salary, the elected officials, they get their per diem, which is tax-free, by the way. And I think the average is around 170 bucks, but don't quote me. It used to be about 175, but I think they do a formula now that they don't all get the unvouchered money up front. My point being there is the elected officials are there initially to serve us, but when they look at their salary and their per diem and their pension, I just wonder if they make a decision based on their career or based on ours. Because when I look over what's being accomplished versus what we're spending, what we're trying to accomplish, we're not getting the bang for our buck. Legislators to receive a pay raise. Point being there is we're allegedly the second highest, I say we're the highest, but the second highest cost government in the nation, which, like I said, $86,000 per. Okay. This is a spreadsheet showing how we got to where we are. And over a period of time, we go back in our research to 1987, where in '87 they voted themselves a $12,000 pay raise. In '95, they voted themselves another $95,000. They voted not to fund the pension system. Keep that in mind. That's the beginning of why the pension system is over $70 billion in the hole. And in 2001, they voted themselves a 50% pension increase, and they voted the public employees, the PSCA, a 25% pension increase. In 2002, they voted a COLA for the retirees, and after they voted before that not to fund the pension system, I think it was under Rendell, they have a 10-year hiatus not to put money into the pension system. Then after they did that, they voted to give the retired folks a COLA. I don't care that they voted a COLA, but you got to pay for this stuff. And of course, in 2005 was the infamous midnight pay raise. And the only thing that changed that midnight pay raise was when people like us raised Cain about it, and they backed off and rescinded the bill. Of course, a year later, officially, the Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional. They ruled it was unconstitutional because they voted themselves a pay raise during their term in office. If you go to the Pennsylvania Constitution, it's Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 2, Section 8. That's the one. That's number 33. Well, can't find my paper, but if you read the second half of the Article 2, Section 8, it says, no member of either house shall during the term for which he may have been elected receive any increase of salary or mileage under any law passed during his term. How many times did they vote for COLAs? I just told you, a whole series of them, and they voted for pay raise. The Constitution says they can't do it, but they did it anyway. Well, finally, on the midnight pay raise, the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional. It reminds me of Jeff McCollum. He ran for governor some years ago. He said, we just passed the bills. It's up to the Supreme Court to find out if they're constitutional or not. As many lawyers as they have in the House and the Senate, they're telling us that it's not their job. Well, anyway, they ruled it was unconstitutional, but they also ruled that they were entitled to keep their pay raise. So the Supreme Court took care of themselves, and they just made the representatives and the senators the bad guys. Okay. I think I'll hold the cost there for the interest of time and go right into the corruption. Part of this state that is the real embarrassing situation to the rest of the country. But if we go to Article 13, which says Pennsylvania corruption never has a holiday, and that issue includes names like Bob McCord was disgraced and resigned. His penalty's coming, his trial is coming. Of course, the Attorney General Cain, likewise. And these folks get a trial, they get a indictment, they might go to trial, then they start the plea bargain. And they plea bargain all they can to try to retain their pension. If they can retain their pension, they figure they've satisfied their plea to where they're going to continue to be paid long after they're gone. course, then there's the next one, 14, which shows our Attorney General. It also shows, in addition to the Attorney General, our Congressman from Philadelphia, Chaka Fattah. Real name was Green, by the way, before he became a Muslim. And of course, in our own city council, we have Acosta, who is now serving time as well. So, I guess you might say it's not just limited to Harrisburg, we managed to spread it around. Then we go to the next one, which is 15. Says we need reform. No kidding. These cases I just showed you in the previous slide are just examples of the state's corruption, and it needs to end. No question about that. Our state has the reputation of being the most corrupt state in the nation. It's hard to believe. Chicago, Illinois is second to us, but turns out that apparently is the case by standards. I want to show you a list which I put together. If you don't think our political system's corrupt, State Representative Leslie Acosta, convicted of embezzlement, 2016. Attorney General Kathleen Kane, perjury. Representative Bishop, corruption. Representative Brownlee, conflict of interest. Representative James, corruption. Representative Waters, bribery. Treasurer Pennsylvania McCord, extortion. Senator, Washington, conflict of interest, Turnpike Commission, a whole bunch of those, Brymeister, felony, convicted of conflict of interest, Turnpike Commission, Altowich, felony, convicted of conflict of interest, Turnpike Commission, Rubin, bribery, State Representative Miranda, fraud, Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice Jane Orry Melvin, corruption. Her sister, Jane Orry, theft. Minority floor leader, Bob Mello. If you remember the Mello bill, he gave the teachers a golden parachute, became their hero. He pleaded guilty using Senate staffers for his campaign. All these names most every one of these names I rattle off, a couple more here. John Purcell, if you remember John Purcell, conflict of interest and theft, conspiracy. Brent Fees, Computergate. In addition to those names, you remember Bud Dwyer? Yes. Committed suicide. Bud Dwyer was allegedly convicted, or was going to be indicted, for fraud, claiming he took $300,000 in a bribe involving a computer company. The state's witness, William Smith, was their chief prosecuting witness, is the guy that was going to take him down. Bud Dwyer committed suicide, and as time passed, Smith recanted his testimony and admitted he lied under oath. That didn't bring Bud Dwyer back. Bud Dwyer was the fall guy. That was under the Thornburg administration. I'm not politically party sensitive when I look at this stuff, because both parties got enough on their plate to be held accountable. There was a Supreme Court judge, I remember back, Rolf Larson. He was impeached for conspiracy. He got community service. There's a guy probably plead down to retain his pension. An Indiana University professor, John Michael, he said that it cost the citizens of Pennsylvania $1,308 per citizen to cover the corruption costs. That even includes what we spend to incarcerate these guys. So $1,308 of money we shouldn't have to put up. I guess I can only conclude that $86,000 per diem, lifetime insurance, and a pension we dream of, I guess isn't quite enough for some of them. In fact, I picked out 22 of them there, and I only stuck with those except for Bud Dwyer and Larson. They were all 2015, 2016, 2017. If we keep going back, that list can get a lot longer. Finishing up with cost, I failed to mention that we talked property tax earlier. Fact is that 60 cents of every new dollar a school board raises is needed to cover the pensions. And as school districts' costs climb, I'm up to 24 and 25 now. I don't know where we are there. We'll get into the pension system now, get away from the corruption, but starting off with the elephant. Article 18, pensions not bankrupting, so they say. Fact of the matter is, we're $74 billion in arrears, so don't tell me we're not bankrupting, because that has to be made up one way or the other, but it's going to be the taxpayers making it up. And we have next one, 19, is Commonwealth Foundation has been writing articles on the pension crisis. Article 21. Article 21. Pension crisis was brought out in 2012. We haven't done a thing about the pension crisis since 2012. 5 years, and all we heard from Harrisburg was a discussion on what to do about the pension crisis, but it keeps on going. If I look at, if you consider the fact that the PSEA and the union collect student union dues. Now, of course, the union dues, in the case of school districts, they employ someone to collect the dues. I became the dues collector or the treasurer for the union. You are. Some of that money goes for political purposes. Probably a lot of it. So the teachers union, in effect, decides who is going to get the financial support to become an elected official. The elected official then is beholden to the people that put up the money to get him there. So in effect, they elected what would be their boss, except that politician now looks and says the PSA is his boss. So how did some of the interesting aspects of this corruption take place? Well, for example, one example. If a teacher, for instance, works 40 years, graduate from college 22, work till they're 62, 40 years. They put a multiplier in there that says a school teacher can take their 40 years, multiply by 2.5, that equals 100. In effect, 100%. They take their 3 best years of salary, get an average, and let's just say after 40 years, they might be up to $80,000. If their salary is $80,000 and their pension calculation is 100%, they get $80,000 the rest of their life. It's a pension I'd love to have, but in my case, private industry supports my pension or my 401k. When taxpayer money puts up money for a pension, it seems like politicians have no problem putting up the money that it takes to satisfy those that got them there. They created a bill to modify the pension system in the public employees, whereby a public employee, if the bill gets passed, when he gets the job as a public employee, they want to put him into a 401k. However, all the people before that are remaining in the defined benefit program, whereby if the funding is short, it's made up by tax money. Now, and incidentally, the politicians did not include themselves in this. They are in the same program, and they too get a defined benefit pension. I go back to the slide that we had earlier, we don't have to put it up, but Article 2, Section 8 states, an elected official, as a legislator, is entitled to salary and mileage, and no other compensation whatever. The word pension is not in the Constitution. Well, Baldinger decided to challenge this. He went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that pensions are benefits, and benefits aren't mentioned in the Constitution, therefore pensions are constitutional. Well, I went back to the Supreme Court. In fact, just before that, I even went to Lieutenant Governor Cawley at the time. He was making a public speech, and I suggested to him, he's trying to save money in the budget. I said, why don't you eliminate the pensions to politicians? So you're saying I'm not entitled to a pension? I said, sir, you can have all the pension you want. I just don't want to pay for it. According to the Constitution, I shouldn't have to. He said, nobody ever brought that up to me before. I said, sir, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution. I only read it. He said, I'll get back to you. And he did, and he got back to me, but this is what they ruled, that pensions were considered benefits, and benefits were not in the Constitution. Well, I said, if that's the case, why don't they vote themselves a new car, since they have to go back and forth to work? They'll call it a benefit, and the Supreme Court ruled, well, it's a benefit, not in the Constitution. It was an illogical decision of the Supreme Court, and I don't have to have any particular respect for the Supreme Court. If you want to talk about Jane Orr-Dolan or Ralph Larson, or the last one, I can't remember his name, for having pornography on his screen. Supreme Court is not the ultimate decision maker with high integrity. But they made the decision. But as I say, Supreme Court made a decision. That is an opinion. That's not a law, that's an opinion. Opinions can be challenged. The Constitution will allow, or the legislator could produce another bill that defines pensions as not to be taxpayer supported. Now, they won't do it. There's only a handful in the House and the Senate. I think there's 3 or 4 in the Senate that will not take the pension under constitutional law. Mike Fulmer happens to be the one I come to mind, because when they did the midnight pay raise, Jubileer and Brightville were the kings of the midnight pay raise, and they got dumped, and Mike Fulmer and Eichelberger became our senators. Never in the history of Pennsylvania did we take the House Senate pro tempore, the Senate pro tempore, and the Senate majority whip defeat them in their own primary. But that's how annoyed the taxpayers were that these two guys decided they entitled to another pay raise. But again, the Constitution said no pay raise during the term in office. Folks, they just don't get it. They just don't understand the Constitution's there for my protection, not for their whims. A couple of the issues that I research that I think Article 29 would be one. Paycheck protection. That's the one where I said, we're the treasurer for the union. We collect their dues money. Now there's a bill that's trying to go through the system whereby the portion of money that is being used for political purposes would not be collected by an employee of the township, the borough, the school board. I say go a lot further than that. I say if the union, if the PSFA or SEIU, if they want to have a union, they're entitled to have one based on the law, but they collect their own dues money. I should not have to be the one to collect their dues money. That's what paycheck protection is all about. Right to work. Another bill, right to work bill, basically says, in fact, I'll even quote what it says. Another one I wrote, an article I wrote on this several years ago, but Article 1, Section 1 of the Pennsylvania Constitution states, all men are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent and indefeasible rights, among which are possessing property and pursuing their own happiness. Neither the Commonwealth nor any political subdivision shall deny any person employment of any civil right. A case was going way back to 1903, Erdman versus Mitchell. In that case, the judge said, under the Declaration of Rights of the Constitution of Pennsylvania, the rights of a workman to free use of his hands is a right which neither the legislature or a trade union can take from him, and is one which is bounden duty of the courts to protect. Now, I don't care if people want to join a union. The question is, do they want to? We have unions in Pennsylvania where if 51% decide they want a union, the other 49%, of course, have no choice. What are the consequences? The consequences are Pennsylvania right now, with our environment, both the tax environment and the labor environment, we are 49th and 50th in the nation for attracting business or retaining business. So, what that means is if Trump is successful and he manages to bring jobs back offshore, based on those numbers, they're not going to come to Pennsylvania. They're going to go to the right to work states, 23 of them. And that's what happens to our young today. When they graduate from college or even high school and want to trade, they need to find a job. They head to the right to work states. So what's left in Pennsylvania, those of us that decide to stay here and retire, we're left holding up the fort. We're going to pay the taxes, we're going to pay the property taxes, and we're going to finance government because the workers left the state. We are now in a situation, we lost nearly 8,000 people in the last year. We are on the verge of losing 2 more congressional seats. If you lose 2 congressional seats, it means you've lost that percent of population compared to the rest of the country. We're becoming a second most populated Gray Panther state in the nation. We're second only to Florida, and that's where people do go to retire. So I promise you, if we don't change our environment in this state, change the corruption, change the cost of government, and create an environment that's conducive to have jobs and places where people can go to seek employment, we're not going to get any better. And the situation that we're looking at today is going to be put in the burden of those that decided to stay here. And when I mentioned property tax again, it just reminds me, I got to bring this up. Gene Barr, he's the CEO or chairman of the Chamber of Businesses in Pennsylvania. At a public meeting, Gene Barr, when I asked a question about school property tax, he said it's not fair. His son is now just getting started in life, and you're asking him to kick in another 1 point whatever percent on salary and another percent on sales tax. I said, I'll tell you what. In fact, Matt Briette was there also, the Cohen Foundation. He said the problem is not taxes, the problem is spending. So the two of them are there talking to each other. I interrupted. I said, first of all, Matt, that SB 76 bill, it clearly defines the limits in spending. It does the job, it controls spending. So what you told this audience today, you're not telling the truth. I looked over to Gene Barr and said, now let's think about this. Your son is just starting out. Let's say he started out, he's making himself and found a good job, graduate from college, $100,000 a year. He's going to get a comparable house. Nice house, $4,000 a year in taxes. If he gets a job for $100,000 a year, and we up his income tax by a percent or percent plus a little, it's roughly $1,000. That's $1,000 more he'll pay if this bill goes through. On the sales tax, if half of what he spends is sales tax, $50,000. What's that, 500 bucks? Roughly 1,500 bucks he's going to pay, and he's going to lose $4,000 of payments on property tax. I'm putting him about $2,500 ahead in the game. With my point of view, you're penalizing him the $2,500 bucks from your point of view. Now, which one of us is really penalizing your son? No answer. When you challenge these folks on their alleged facts, they have no real answers. I didn't want to go off on a tangent, but I just happened to think of that, thinking of David today, talking about property tax. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I skipped over a lot because this just doesn't work out the way we thought it would. But before I do a wrap up here, I want to acknowledge a few people that helped put this together. I've been at this for a year, but during that time, I go back all the way to the beginning where Donna Peters had put me towards some websites and links that got me a lot of the information I needed. Particularly, she linked me up with Eric Epstein, who's the Rock the Capital. Eric Epstein's base numbers are what I use and we use to develop the whole spreadsheets on pensions. Citizens Alliance of Pennsylvania, CAP, I got articles from them. I had meetings with Representatives Frank Ryan, formerly retired Marine Colonel Frank Ryan, and Mark Gillen, Representative Gillen, and also with Rick Dreyfuss. Input from them. I got information from the Reading Eagle and their articles. Liam Smith has produced articles that provided backup information. A lot of right-to-know requests. We had pushed through a lot of right-to-know requests to the House archives. And the woman that got us information, she says, I'm giving you this anonymously, and I know that the stuff we got from her, the politicians would not be happy to find out where we got it. So she preferred to remain anonymous. And of course, helping to dig us information all this time, put these graphs together, was Ron Danner, and all this computer work here was done by Paul Barner, so Brooker, sorry. Without their help and these other folks, we would not get to where we were today on this. And with a little bit of effort, we'll move ahead on this. Okay, was yelled out earlier, what are we going to do about this? Well, there are other things we can do, but several things we can do, but keep in mind the downside is 97% of elected officials return to office. They are not at all concerned about us. The only thing they understand is pain, and you got to give them pain before they acknowledge that you're around. They welcome access to their office. They think that was the service they're providing, but access to their office does not get the job done. We have to take action. And I'm thinking the kind of action that worked, I'm thinking of Bob Templates, when Dean Klopp and his group went up to his district and campaigned heavily door to door with petitions, and then held a town hall. The end result was the people got it up in arms and they voted Templates out of office. So it's intense effort, but it can be done, and it was done. There's another organization, Foundation of Applied Conservative Leadership, otherwise known as FACL. They run leadership seminars. I went to one of them. Some of us went to the whole day seminar, and they showed by calculation how few people you must contact actually to change the results of the election. Stay away from the super voters on the Republican or the Democrat side. You won't change their mind. You got to get to those that are in the middle, those that can be convinced otherwise. And until you would break it down, I think it's down to like 3% of the people's minds have to be changed to change the outcome of the vote. So, just one more example. I think one other thing is this pension system is totally out of control. They're not going to change until the pressure's on. If, for example, you put one of the people in your own district and you created a petition that you wanted him out of the pension system based on the Constitution, if he chose not to do it, you've done it, just like the PSEA. If they don't give what they want, they run somebody against them. We can do the same thing. If they want to remain in the pension system as it goes bankrupt, then we got to pick up the tab. We got to get them out of there. We do have some of them out. We have a lot more in it than out. Only a few. I think there's 24 in the House and 3 in the Senate that did not take the pension system because of the same reason I'm explaining. It's unconstitutional. Well, I've covered a lot. I've stumbled through this stuff. The system game plan didn't work as I planned, but I tried to get the message out. If I explain anything, how the cost is out of control, the pension system is out of control, the corruption is out of control, they're all tied together. It all has to do with our wallet. If I convince you enough to want to do something about it, maybe I didn't waste an hour of your time, but if I did convince you, I certainly wasted up to a year of my time, plus my colleagues' time. So I would only suggest that you consider what you want to do, or what you can do, to try to change the mindset of Harrisburg, because if we don't convince them that things have to change, and we don't get them to the point that there's an opponent running against them, and they better consider that, things won't change, and that 97% return rate will continue. It's not going to be Patriot leadership. It's not going to be Dean Klopp's leadership to his group. It's not going to be the Lehigh 9/11, 9/12s. I'm sorry. It won't be even Jim Rockley's Lebanon group. Each group has to have people on the street willing to do something to change the mindset in Harrisburg. Otherwise, I'm telling you folks, we are the most expensive government, the most corrupt government, and the best paid pension system in the nation. And it's got to change. I'm going to leave it with that and say if there's any questions I might be able to answer, things I had but I didn't cover. I'll take a couple Q&A. What do we have in time? Just about there. Any questions out there at all?
Question? Let's get it.
I I forget what year it was, you said they decided not to put any money in the pension fund anymore. But what happened to the money that they used to put into the pension fund? Where did that money go?
Yeah, I think it was '05, no, it's 97, it's under Rendell, who made the proposal to have a 10-year hiatus on funding the pension system. However, where did the money go that was there? As I said, they changed the multiplier for teachers to years of service times 2.5. In effect, teachers will continue their salary up to 100% for the rest of their life, and all those people that retired. And the Mellow Bill encouraged some to retire early. So there's one place it went. Other things that are happening is we're not changing the pension system for the people, the public employees that are presently employed. The bills that they're proposing is making any new employee fall under a 401k type plan. Think about that. All those people now employed will remain under the present system, and it'll take years before they're cycled through and 401k hirees come into the business, into the fold. So from that standpoint, there's nothing been done to try to slow down the money that's leaving. On the political side, politicians took care of themselves. They passed one bill that says an elected official can take full pension at 55. It used to be 50. But when they passed this bill, they grandfathered everybody in. If you were employed, if you were elected prior to 2010, you're grandfathered in and you can walk into a full pension at 50 years old. I didn't put all the numbers on the sheet, but I can tell you without even looking, just to show you how bad this is. Bob Jubileer was kicked, took $194,000 right off the top. That's his money that he put in at 4% compounded interest. He then took the rest of his pension, spread out for his life. $80,000 a year the rest of his life, and we kicked him out. If you run those numbers, Bright Bill likewise, he took well over $100,000. He gets around $45,000 a year the rest of his life. You run these numbers of all politicians, it's just staggering. It's like $100 million of committed money for the ones we checked, which was 54 in the House and 26 in the Senate. More people, since we've done this, have also retired. It keeps growing. We're not changing the defined benefit program, and as a result, the money is drying up. And that's what happened. What money they thought was there, we had this financial debacle. What year was that? '05, the economic downside when pension systems really went down the toilet. They didn't have the money they thought they had. And not only that, but I'm not even getting into that part, but I think they were paying Wall Street $63 million a year to administrate the program. You can get an insurance company, by comparison, to do it for peanuts and do just as good a job. So that's examples where the money went that they thought was there.
Can we squeeze one more question? You have time for one more question?
Yeah, I have time. People might want to go, but I'm here.
So pay attention here to what I'm saying. These people violated our constitutional rights, right? Correct?
They violated the Constitution.
The Constitution, that's for us, for people. So election time is coming up, and it seems, not to pick on anybody or anything like that, but lots going away with the judges and such like that, that say they will follow the Constitution, will uphold it. They take an oath for that. Pay attention to that. Make sure you hold them to it, because that Constitution is for us. It's not for them. It's for us.
As I wrap it up, is there any chance we can get that spreadsheet on the screen? We have it on the screen now, just to show you examples of how these folks, when they pass bills in Harrisburg, the first thing they think of, will it affect my career? Will it affect my longevity? Will it affect my pension? If it doesn't, then they'll see how it does affect our lives. And then they'll decide on how to vote. But if you think of all those bills that never get passed, right to work, pension reform, property tax, paycheck protection, even the Second Amendment bills, they're just not going anywhere. They've been there for years. I met Dave Baldinger 10 years ago down at Ole when the Finance Committee had hearings on property tax. 10 years, not a thing has happened. I worked with Sam Rohr on his bills. That's when I wrote my first papers on pension reform, property tax reform. Nothing happens, folks. I hope Dave's hard work is going to accomplish anything, but I'll tell you what, I'm concerned that the school boards and the PSEA have been spending their time lobbying, and they're working on senators. For some of those senators that were yeses, probably weak senators, I hope they're still yeses, but I have a concern from the inside, my inside information, that these guys are going to be tough to stay on board. I'm doing a wrap. He has the pension sheet up there on the sheet, but as you can see, if you look at a name, look at some, here's Jubileer, for example. Jubileer, projected that when he's 78 years old, Jubileer will take $193,000 lump sum, and then he'll take another $90,000 a year. I said 80. $90,000 a year after we throw him out. Mind you, their base pay is only $86,000. They got a system that I'd love to have. That's just one example. There's a lot more here. Here's the time. I can show anybody what we have here later, but like I said, for those that we picked, it's nearly $100 million of tax money providing these folks their pension, and free medical, free dental, free eye for the rest of their lives. And they can stipulate that they want their pension to go to their wife in case they pass on, except the discount of that pension is such where if a wife only lives 3 years longer than the politician that passed away, they already made up that reduction. So the system is rigged, folks. It's just the way it is. Okay, thank you much for your time.
Folks, this did not go quite as smooth as Ron and company wanted to, but I want to tell you, it's not for a lack of effort. These people put a lot of time in, and I think they had so much data to condense in such a short period of time that it hindered their efforts. But we want to let's give Ron and Paul and Ron a great big hand, folks. Please, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to close the meeting in prayer. Just want to let you know, we have a few hot dogs in the back. They're 2 for 1. Also, I have a note from Woody. It's not freezing outside yet, but please be very careful in the parking lot. It is wet. Just be careful where you walk. There could be something frozen. I walked out through there and could not find anything, but be very, very careful. Thank you, and Dave, end our meeting in prayer.
Lord, we thank you for the information you've given us here tonight, and we pray you come up with some ideas. Give us ideas, Lord, suggestions of what we should do, Lord. Help us to uphold our Constitution, Lord, and get to the bottom of this with the school taxes, the pensions, Lord. We need your help. So, Lord, we pray to bless everybody, give them a safe ride home. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.